saw you in heaven.
From selling 100 million albums to losing the three bands he loved most, behind every guitar legend's smile was a journey few understood. Think about this. Eric Clapton, the man they called Slowhand, standing on stages around the world, fingers dancing across guitar strings like magic. But here's what most people don't know. Before he became the solo star we remember, before Wonderful Tonight made us all believe in love again, Eric's heart was broken 3 times by the bands that made him famous. Today, we're diving deep into a story that goes back 20 years, 3 bands, 3 heartbreaks, 1 guitar that changed everything. We're talking about Cream, the power trio that started it all. Blind Faith, the experiment that lasted only months but left a mark forever. And Derek and the Dominos, where love and pain created the greatest guitar ballad ever written. But this isn't just about music. It's about a young guy from England who found his voice through a guitar, who watched his musical families fall apart, and who somehow turned that heartbreak into hope. From the blues clubs of London to the big stadiums of America, from the heights of Crossroads to the depths of addiction, and finally to healing through songs like Wonderful Tonight. By the end of this story, you'll understand why Eric Clapton isn't just a guitarist. He's a survivor, and you'll see how losing everything taught him what really matters. So grab a cup of coffee, get comfortable, and let's explore what really happened to Eric Clapton's 3 bands. Let's start at the beginning. It's London, 1966. The Beatles had already taken over the world, but something was missing from rock music: raw, bluesy power. That's when 3 musicians came together to create something nobody had ever heard before. Eric had already made his mark with the Yardbirds and John Mayall's Bluesbreakers. That famous Beano album had sold 500,000 copies and caught Jimi Hendrix's attention. But Eric wanted more. He wanted to push blues into new territory. Enter Jack Bruce on bass and vocals, and Ginger Baker on drums. These 3 guys created the first real power trio, something no one had tried before. But here's the thing about creative partnerships. They're like lightning in a bottle. Brilliant, explosive, and impossible to control. But nobody was ready for what happened next. Cream's sound was unlike anything the world had heard. Take Crossroads, their electric version of Robert Johnson's old blues song. When Eric's guitar solo kicked in during their live shows, audiences literally jumped up and screamed. Music writers called it the moment guitar became religion. Then came Sunshine of Your Love, from the Disraeli Gears album. That opening riff, you know, the one, became the soundtrack of a generation. Radio stations played it non-stop. Kids in garages tried to copy Eric's sound. Guitar stores couldn't keep Fender Stratocasters in stock. But success came with a price. Cream sold over 15 million albums worldwide, making them one of the biggest selling rock acts of their time. They were pioneers, yes, but pioneers often burn bright and fast, and that's exactly what started happening behind the scenes. Here's where things get messy. Jack Bruce and Ginger Baker couldn't stand each other. Imagine this. You're Eric Clapton, barely 23 years old, trying to keep peace between 2 grown men who argue about everything from how fast to play to what to eat for dinner. Eric often felt more like a babysitter than a guitarist. The fighting was real. During recording sessions, Bruce and Baker would have screaming matches. On tour, they'd refuse to eat together. Eric found himself caught in the middle, watching his musical dreams fall apart because of personality fights that had nothing to do with the music. The end came in 1968, but not with a big fight, with exhaustion. After their goodbye concert at London's Royal Albert Hall, Eric made a decision that shocked the music world. He walked away from guaranteed millions, from sold-out stadiums, from being part of the hottest band on the planet. Why? Because Eric understood something that many artists never learn. Money can't fix a broken heart, and fame can't heal broken friendships. As he told Rolling Stone years later, "We were making great music, but we weren't making each other happy." But losing Cream wasn't the end. Eric was about to try something even bigger. What do you do when you've just left the biggest band in the world? If you're Eric Clapton in 1969, you do something even crazier. You create a supergroup that makes Cream look like a warm-up act. Enter Steve Winwood, the keyboard wizard from Traffic, whose smooth voice had already made him a star. Add Rick on bass and, yes, Ginger Baker again on drums. This was Blind Faith, four of the most talented musicians in Britain coming together for what everyone hoped would be magic. And for a moment, it was. Their first show was at London's Hyde Park in front of 36,000 people. Here's the crazy part. They'd never even practiced together as a full band. Their very first time playing together was in front of more people than most bands ever see. But here's the beautiful part. It worked. Eric's blues rock guitar mixed perfectly with Steve's smooth keyboards. When they played Can't Find My Way Home, the crowd went silent, hanging on every note. This wasn't just music. It was four souls talking without words. The chemistry was obvious. Their self-titled album, released in August 1969, sold over 1 million copies within months. Rolling Stone called it a masterpiece of power and control. Songs like Sea of Joy showed a more grown-up Eric, one who could paint feelings with his guitar rather than just show off his skills. But success in music, like success in life, often comes with unexpected problems. The pressure was huge. Everyone expected them to be the next Beatles. Record companies wanted hit singles. Fans wanted cream-level energy. The media watched their every move. Then came the American tour, and everything fell apart. Think about it. Crazy schedules, endless flights, hotels that all looked the same. The band was physically and emotionally worn out within weeks. These weren't kids anymore. They were experienced musicians who thought they could handle anything. They were wrong, but something else was happening to Eric during this time. Something that would change his life forever. In the middle of all the chaos, he found Christianity, not the trendy Eastern stuff that many musicians were trying, but real Christian faith. This wasn't just another rock star phase. This was a genuine spiritual awakening. As Eric described it in later interviews, I needed something bigger than music to hold on to. The pressure of being a guitar legend was crushing him. Fans looked at him like he was superhuman, but inside, he felt lost and empty. The end came faster than anyone expected. After just one album and a few tours, Blind Faith broke up. No dramatic fights this time, no screaming match, just four exhausted men who realized they'd bitten off more than they could chew. But Eric learned something important during those brief months with Blind Faith. Great music isn't just about technical skill, it's about emotional honesty. It's about being brave enough to let people see your heart through your art. But Eric's biggest test was still coming. Here's where Eric Clapton's story takes a turn, toward the deeply personal. After Blind Faith, Eric wasn't looking to start another band. He was tired of the spotlight, tired of being called a guitar legend, tired of the pressure that came with being famous. Then he met Delaney and Bonnie Bramlett, a husband and wife Southern rock duo that most people had never heard of. But here's the twist. Instead of forming another supergroup, Eric did something completely unexpected. He became their backup guitarist. Imagine that. One of the most famous guitarists in the world, happy to stand in the shadows and learn. This wasn't about ego or money. This was about remembering why he fell in love with music in the first place. Delaney Bramlett taught Eric something new, how to sing with feeling, not just technical perfection. Bramlett told him, talent comes from God, not from some deal at the Crossroads. Talking about the old Robert Johnson legend. That tour with Delaney and Bonnie changed everything. Eric found his voice, literally and figuratively. When the tour ended, 3 of Delaney's musicians, Bobby Whitlock on keyboards, Carl Radle on bass, and Jim Gordon on drums, followed Eric back to England. Derek and the Dominos was born out of friendship, not business plans. Eric was so determined to avoid the spotlight that they first performed under the mysterious name Derek and the Dominos, keeping Eric's identity secret. For a brief moment, he was just another guitarist in a rock band, and it felt wonderful. Then came the music that would define Eric's lasting impact forever. The album Layla and Other Assorted Love Songs wasn't just recorded, it was lived. Imagine this, 4 young musicians locked up in Criteria Studios in Miami, Florida, with guest guitarist Duane Allman from the Allman Brothers Band. But here's something most people don't know about those Miami recording sessions. Duane taught Eric slide guitar techniques that took his playing to a completely new level. But the real story behind Layla is one of the most famous love triangles in rock history. Eric had fallen desperately in love with Pattie Boyd, who was married to his close friend George Harrison of the Beatles. The pain of loving someone he couldn't have, combined with the musical chemistry with Duane Allman, created something magical. Layla wasn't just a song, it was Eric's heart bleeding through amplifiers. The opening guitar riff, played in harmony with Duane, was like 2 souls crying together. Then came that piano section, 7 minutes of pure emotion that said everything words couldn't express. The song was inspired by the story of Layla and Majnun, an old Persian poem about impossible love. But Eric's version was real, raw, and utterly heartbreaking. When you listen to Layla, you're not just hearing music, you're witnessing a man's heart breaking in real time. The album sold over 2 million copies, but success couldn't heal Eric's personal pain. He was fighting heroin addiction, struggling with love he couldn't have, and watching another band family fall apart. The other Dominos were dealing with their own problem. Bobby Whitlock later described the atmosphere as brilliant music, born from broken hearts. The end came during sessions for a second album that was never finished. They recorded songs like Evil and One More Chance, but the band was too broken to continue. Eric was spiraling deeper into addiction. The music industry that had made him rich was slowly destroying his soul. Derek and the Dominos played their final concert in 1971, and Eric disappeared from public view for nearly 2 years. He hid away at his Surrey estate, fighting heroin addiction and depression. Friends like Pete Townshend and George Harrison worried he might never play guitar again. But sometimes, hitting rock bottom becomes the foundation for something beautiful. Because Eric's greatest music wasn't behind him, it was still waiting to be born from the ashes of everything he'd lost. Imagine Eric Clapton in 1973, 28 years old, 3 legendary bands behind him, and completely lost. He was hiding in his Surrey mansion, fighting heroin addiction, his famous guitar gathering dust in the corner. The man who had made millions scream with joy couldn't find a reason to smile himself. Then Pete Townshend of The Who did something amazing. He organized what became known as the Rainbow Concert, basically an intervention disguised as a comeback show. The idea was simple: get Eric back on stage, remind him why he fell in love with music, and maybe save his life in the process. That January night at London's Rainbow Theatre, Eric walked on stage for the first time in nearly 2 years. His hands were shaking, his voice was rough. But when he played Layla, something magical happened. The audience didn't just applaud, they welcomed him home. The road to recovery wasn't easy. Eric spent time in a Welsh countryside retreat, getting acupuncture treatment for his addiction. This was where he found not just his sobriety, but his purpose again. Away from the spotlight, surrounded by nature, he remembered that music was supposed to heal, not hurt. His comeback album 46 on Ocean Boulevard, released in 1974, was like a letter to the world saying, "I'm still here." The album featured his cover of Bob Marley's I Shot the Sheriff, which became his first #1 hit in America. But more importantly, it showed a different Eric, one who could blend reggae, blues and pop into something entirely new. Then came 1977, and the song that would define Eric's solo career, Wonderful Tonight. If Layla was Eric's heartbreaking, then Wonderful Tonight was his heart healing. Written about Pattie Boyd, yes, the same woman who inspired Layla, whom Eric eventually married, the song captured a tender moment of everyday love. The Slow Hand album, which included Wonderful Tonight, sold over 10 million copies. But the numbers don't tell the real story. This was Eric showing the world that the guitar legend could also be open and honest, tender and deeply human. The man who once played screaming solos that could shatter windows was now creating lullabies that could heal broken hearts. But Eric's change went deeper than music. In 1998, he started the Crossroads Center in Antigua, a treatment facility for people struggling with addiction. This wasn't just charity. This was Eric taking his own pain and turning it into hope for others. Eric turned his demons into something that helps others. Every person who gets clean at Crossroads Center is proof that Eric's journey through darkness wasn't wasted. Today, at 80 years old, Eric is still touring, still playing, still inspiring. He finished a European tour in 2025, playing to audiences who span 3 generations: grandparents who saw Cream, parents who grew up with Wonderful Tonight, and kids discovering blues guitar for the first time. The man who once lost 3 bands found something more valuable: the guitar techniques he learned from Duane Allman, the spiritual grounding he found after Blind Faith, the emotional honesty he discovered through Derek and the Dominos. All of it came together to create an artist who's still growing, still learning, still giving. Most importantly, Eric learned that losing something you love doesn't have to break you. Sometimes it's exactly what you need to find who you're really meant to be. So, what really happened to Eric Clapton's 3 bands? The answer isn't what you might expect. Cream didn't fail. It taught Eric that great music needs harmony between people, not just instruments. Blind Faith didn't disappoint. It showed him that fame without spiritual grounding is just noise. Derek and the Dominos didn't break his heart. They broke it open, making room for something deeper. Here's the pattern when you look at Eric's journey: working together, hitting it big, facing challenges, growing, and then changing completely. Each band was a chapter in his education, not as a guitarist, but as a human being. Cream made him famous. Blind Faith made him question fame. Derek and the Dominos made him face his demons. And his solo career? That made him whole. Think about it. If Cream had never broken up, we might never have gotten Layla. If Derek and the Dominos had stayed together, we might never have gotten Wonderful Tonight. Eric's music showed endings can become beginnings. Heartbreak can become healing. Eric Clapton's story isn't really about losing 3 bands. It's about finding himself through music, friendship, heartbreak, and healing. It's about understanding that being a guitar legend isn't about playing perfectly. It's about playing honestly. The next time you hear Crossroads, remember the young man who left the Yardbirds because he refused to compromise his artistic vision. When Wonderful Tonight comes on the radio, think about the journey from pain to peace. And when you see an older musician still pushing boundaries at 80, remember that some stories don't end, they just keep getting better. Eric Clapton didn't lose 3 bands. He gained a lifetime of music that continues to touch hearts around the world. And maybe that's the most beautiful ending of all. What's your favorite Eric Clapton memory? Did you discover him through Cream's power, Blind Faith's soul, or Derek and the Dominos' passion? Share your story in the comments below. I'd love to hear how his music touched your life. And if you enjoyed diving deep into music history, hit that subscribe button. We've got more legendary stories coming your way, because every great artist has a journey worth exploring. Remember, the best music doesn't just entertain, it transforms. And Eric Clapton's 3 bands, they transformed not just rock music, but the man who played guitar for them.